All right. Well, Dr. Lehmkuhler, appreciate you being with us this evening and working through Zoom here to do this. It's worked out pretty well so far. We've done a couple of these, and our numbers haven't been what they would have been in person, but we've had a lot of really good interaction. We picked up new people actually that maybe weren't able to attend a meeting before. So that's been really good. And toward the end of the program, I've got just a poll question that I'll put out to the group and kind of get your, I guess, feedback on maybe how you would like to have meetings in the future once we're able to meet again. So if you have questions as we go, and I know that you will, just put them in the chat box if that's okay. And I'll monitor the chat box for you, Jeff, and kind of help us go along as we go throughout the evening. So we're going to plan to go till about 8 o'clock. If there's questions past that, we'll probably take a few of those, but if anybody needs to drop off right at 8, well, that'll be fine too. So Jeff, appreciate it. We ended up having a fall that was really pretty good for grass, and I mean, a lot of guys were able to graze way up into the winter, which was really good. And the first part of winter didn't really turn out too bad, but the last couple of weeks, I think, made up for it. Sure. And, all the cold weather and ice and everything, it really kind of weighs on these cattle. And I guess at this point, we're kind of thinking about what we need to do coming out of winter, going into spring a little bit with these cattle and body condition, and thinking about, kind of getting them on through the end here and getting ready for grass. So maybe we can kind of start with that as maybe a general lead in.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'm going to see Brandon. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep, I've got you.
Thumbs up. All right, good. I'm going to make sure everything's sharing. All right. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, it looks like it's your son.
It is. So, I got to take one of those proud papa times, but my son is actually at Clemson today and tomorrow competing for U of L, and had to throw that in there, Brandon, for you, being that, you're a little bit of a connection there with Louisville. But the other thing I thought it would be kind of fitting is to try and think about getting over some of the hurdles. And as we go through things, there's always a challenge this time of the year. And we thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about some of those challenges that we're faced with. So hopefully you'll all see the slideshow here as soon as we get this going. And Brandon, you'll have to let me know if you see presentation view or the full slide.
Looks like it just switched to full slide.
Good. All right. So I don't have a whole lot to share formally, but this will give you all a little bit of time to be thinking about some questions and, try to think outside maybe of some questions that we haven't normally had the chance to address. What I do today, just to give you a rough idea, Dr. Hallich and I, as well as several of our producers that are working with us on a 2-year SARE grant that we had to look at bale grazing on some farms here in Kentucky. And we met with NRCS staff today just to try and familiarize them a little bit with the process so that they better understand what bale grazing is. And when they get questions about bale grazing, and they'll be maybe a little bit better informed on what it is and some of the management principles behind it. But this is one of the producers here. This is his, I think, 2nd or 3rd year of bale grazing. And this is today's pictures. So we just had all that snow melt and everything. And you can kind of see what these fields look like. And I'll show you a few other pictures here as we go on. And it looks pretty good here when you're looking at it like this, right? I mean, not a lot of damage, but when we move in and we start looking at, some other pictures, I guess I just throw out, what do you think about, the differences here? And this is the exact same field. These cows that we looked at in that previous slide, this is the field that they're in. You can still see a couple of the cows in here. So I left those cows in the picture for reference to make sure you were on the same page, that they weren't in a different field or anything. But one of the benefits that we see with bale grazing in the left slide over here is you're getting a significant amount of fertility. You can see all the cow pies here from the cows, but there's also the urine that you're not seeing, which is a significant potassium and nitrogen fertility source. So on this left side of the picture is where he started feeding in this field. And on the right side is the most recent area he just finished right when we had all the snow melt coming in. And so when you've got that much extra moisture from that snow melt, you'll see a little bit more damage, and you just have to kind of manage that and reduce the density and some of those things. But he's feeding the equivalent of about 2 tons of hay per acre. His bales are weighing about 7 to 750 pounds. So he's putting out 6 bales to the acre and given those 26 pairs of that. He's very happy with it. But I just wanted you to see this. You may have seen this from Dr. Hallich's presentations in the future, but this is what we were doing today, just to kind of let you know we were out enjoying a little bit of the sunshine. So I thought we would touch on a few things just to top of mind to get us all kind of thinking about what we need to be preparing for nutritionally on the cows, as again, you all think about some questions that you might have. Let's think about high mag mineral, particularly for any of you that have spring calving cows. Some of them may have started dropping calves already, but particularly as you move from now into March, I've seen some grass today starting to green up pretty significantly, where we had a lot of warm temperatures down in the low area on south facing slopes. It was really starting to green up with this warm temperature that we had the last few days. So as that grass begins to shoot up, it does not have the time to pull magnesium out of the soil as quick as it grows. And so even though the cows maybe were calved 2 or 3 weeks ago and they were fine on the normal mineral, when they switch from the hay, the hay will have sometimes 2 times the amount of magnesium as what this lush grass will have. And so that's when we see some issues with these spring calvers. And what we mean by high mag mineral is generally a product that has 10% magnesium on the feed tag labeled for a 4-ounce intake. And so I'll show you a feed tag here in a minute. But that's really what we're looking for, 10% or more magnesium in these 4-ounce intake products. Generally speaking, we say to try to feed that until about the middle of May, typically about the time when the ground temperatures are hitting 60, and that's about the middle of May for us. And the other thing I'll just mention is we did reformulate the UK IRM minerals guidelines, and so those were updated and sent out a few weeks ago. One of the things that happened is we had previously recommended the prilled form of magnesium oxide, and the prilled form is like a little BB, and so it's round, and that reduces the surface area. Magnesium oxide is really bitter, and so by having it prilled, there's less surface area to touch the tongue on the cow. But since we've had to go back to a powdered product or a ground product, it will have more of an issue on intake. And so we chose to drop the magnesium level from 15% down to 12%. We were getting some feedback from some folks that were using the UK IRM mineral that they were having issues with the mineral intake. And so we took out some of the magnesium oxide and added back in either dried molasses or some additional distiller's grains to try and overcome the palatability issues. There were a few other small changes, and you can ask Brandon for the spec sheets if you want those, or you can go to the UK's regulatory services, and if you click on feed, then they have a link to the mineral guidelines as well. There are small changes in some of the minerals. For instance, manganese. We dropped it in one of the products because we just rarely see manganese deficiencies. In the 20 some odd years that I've been doing this, I've only seen one case of manganese deficiency. And so that was one of the reasons we decided to change manganese in some of the products. But don't confuse manganese with magnesium. Magnesium is a mineral that we need to be watching here in this spring flush, and manganese is a trace mineral. Here's a example tag. Just you all are, oh, sorry about that. I meant to move my, y'all are probably seeing my pictures up here and you don't need to see that. Here's an example tag. And so this is just a commercial product tag that I wanted to show you. And as a few reminders, we've talked about this in some of our programs in the past. If you don't know what the target intake should be, one of the keys is the level of selenium in the mineral product. And so as we look at this one, this selenium level right through here is 20 parts per million. A 4-ounce product would have 26 parts per million, and a 3-ounce product would have 35 parts per million, and a 2-ounce consumption would have 52. And again, that's all based off of the FDA's allowable level of 3 milligrams per day from supplement for beef cows. Other thing I wanted to remind you of, we get a lot of questions about chelated minerals and mineral products. With chelates are organic sources of minerals. And so you can check a tag to see if it's in there. You look at this one and it says Co-op Supreme High Mag, but it doesn't say that it has chelated organic sources of trace minerals. So the way you can determine that is by looking for some of these words, and it'll be selenium yeast if it's got maybe a Celplex or another type of a product like that. It could be seleno yeast. But as you read through here and you look at the ingredients, you see sodium selenite. That is the inorganic or salt form of selenium. And then right below it, we see the selenium yeast. And so we know that it does have a source of organic selenium. Zinc, copper, manganese often will be in the form of, the name will be either zinc amino acid complex or zinc proteinate, or copper proteinate, copper lysine, because lysine is an amino acid. And so when you read through these, you start looking again. Here's the zinc amino acid complex. Here's the copper amino acid complex. And so we know that there are sources of organic or chelated minerals in these products. And then cobalt is another one. Cobalt's going to be linked to a complex sugar, and it's a glucose-based sugar structure. And so if it says cobalt glucoheptanate on the tag, then you know it's also got a organic or chelated form of cobalt in it. And so I just wanted to try to kind of rehash this. We still see some herds struggling with copper and selenium deficiencies. And one of the solutions to that is to use a product that would have a chelated organic source in there. And oftentimes we get questions, well, how do I know by looking at a feed tag if it's not listed? So I just wanted to kind of refresh your memory on that. And then lastly, the zinc to copper ratio is something that we may not have hit on very much. And I've seen some issues recently where this ratio has gotten a little out of whack and has maybe caused some problems. And so I just wanted to remind you that the zinc to copper ratio should be 2 to 3 to 1. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if you come up here and you look at zinc, Zinc is at 2,600 parts per million, and copper is at 1,300 parts per million. So there's twice as much zinc as there is copper. So that's that 2-to-1 ratio. If you get too much zinc in there, I have seen these ratios as high as like 10-to-1 in some stress type mineral products and those things. It can actually cause copper to not be absorbed at the same level. They kind of compete for some transporters, and you can induce a copper deficiency when these ratios kind of get out of whack a little bit. So I just wanted to bring that up and just kind of give you a good kind of benchmark when you're looking at mineral tags, what to be looking for on that copper and zinc level. 1,000 parts per million for a 4-ounce product is kind of the bare minimum. And if you've struggled with copper deficiencies in the past, you might be up there in the 1,500, 1,600 ppms for a 4-ounce intake type of product. Now let's switch gears just a little bit and think about cows and getting them ready to calve. Tuesday night, my colleague, Dr. Van Valen, on the Rally program will be covering body condition scoring, but in case you can't make that, I thought we would cover that real quick. Again, remember that the target should be around a 5 to 6 body condition score at calving time. And ideally, from the time that she calves to the time that we turn the bull in, we don't want to see those cows lose more than 1 body condition score. And that can be a little problematic here as we start getting grass starting to green up and these cows start picking at it. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. On the flip side of that, if you want to optimize reproductive success, the research is very, very clear on this, time in and time out again. If you want to optimize reproductive success and get as many cows settled in the first cycle as possible, the ideal situation is those cows maintain that 5 to 6 body condition score from the time that they calve to the time that you turn the bull in. If they're losing body condition score, they're going into a negative energy balance, and you're shifting the hormonal kind of sequence there. And if they go into severe negative energy balance, she moves into self-preservation mode. And it's one of those where there's hormones that are produced by the fat cells that are involved in the cascade of the reproductive hormone system. And when you start losing excessive amounts of those fat cells, you lose that hormonal signal from those fat cells, and she just will stay in anestrus and won't come back into heat as quick after she calves. So that's just kind of my take-home point on that, because as soon as these cows start getting a little taste of green grass, you all see that, and we all love it, because this time of the year, especially after Sunday, if we get 3 to 4 inches of rain like they're calling for, you're going to want to quit feeding hay as quick as you can and quit fighting the mud. But that cow on this lush grass that's growing, that's only about 10% dry matter and 90% water, she's got to pick 300 to 400 pounds of that grass every day. And when that green grass is only a half to an inch tall, you all go out there with your 3 fingers like this to mimic her trying to wrap her tongue around it and see how long it takes you to pull up 300 pounds of grass that's an inch tall. You're going to spend a lot of time doing that, and your hand's going to get tired. And she's going to walk up and down a lot of these hillsides, and we can actually see cows walk off energy and walk off body condition score, trying to get every little blade of green grass here as we start in the green up. So still feed some hay through this period and let that grass get a jump. I like to see it 3 to 4 inches of good new regrowth before you turn cows in on it. I learned that when I was in Missouri, and the fellow that I tenant farmed for, he told me, Jeff, don't ever turn them in until the grass is over your boot top. And so when you're standing in there, and by boot top, we're talking right over your toes, so most of the time, if you're wearing work shoes and that, you're looking to get about 3 to 4 inches over top of your boot toe. So by the time it gets 3-4 inches, you know, it's easier for them to wrap that tongue around and get it into their mouth where they can get it on that dental pad and those bottom teeth and tear it off. All right, let's talk about body condition scores. Y'all ready for your quiz? So on a piece of paper or mentally, or type it in the chat, whatever you want to do. This is cow number 1. What is her body condition score on a scale of 1 to 9? 1 is extremely thin, as you remember, and 9 is extremely obese. I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to think about it and write it down. This is cow number 1. She's the black cow. This is cow number 2. And then cow number 3. All right, I'm going to say, Brandon, that this is the time I'm going to let them, if they want to unmute themselves, go ahead and unmute yourselves and give me some of your numbers. Who wants to volunteer and answer? Or I'll start calling you out. Paul,
Yikes.
go ahead.
Who did he say,
He
Paul?
said Paul.
I don't know. I thought the number 1 would probably be a 6, maybe. And 2, maybe a little more flesh, a 7. And the 3 cow around the 8. I don't know.
Good, okay.
Feeder cattle, so.
We don't look at cows.
That's all right, okay. Let's see, Roger, I see you're on down there. He's not going to unmute.
I
There
got
he
you.
is. There he
Okay.
is.
I'm going to go on 1 is probably 4 to 5 in that range. 2, 5 to 6, 3, 6.
Good. All right. Irvin, I see you're here.
I hope you wouldn't see that. I got number 1 as a 5. I got number 2 as a 6, and number 3 as a 7. I wanted to go halfway on some of them, but I gave them whole numbers.
Good, because you knew I'm not Les Anderson, and I would give you a hard time. So, all right, this is mine. You know, as I look at this cow here, and let me get rid of this again. So as I look at this cow here, there's a few key places to look at. And again, it's hard in pictures because you can't get your hands on them and that, but I can see the point of her shoulder pretty prominent. And so I know that she's mobilized a little bit of condition, but I can see her shoulder blade or her scapula here a little bit too. So I know that she's not got a whole lot of fat cover underneath on this front shoulder. If you can see it, depending on your computer screen, there's not much brisket down in here at all. This dewlap or skin comes down in here into that brisket area, and it's not bulging hardly at all. It's folding right into that sternum and that brisket down here. She does not really show much for any ribs. Generally speaking, when we would move a cow from a 5 down to a 4, we would say you can see the last couple ribs pretty prominently. And you can just, and again, you have to have a pretty good quality screen to see this, but you can just make out this rib, and there's another rib that's coming right down through here that you can make out, and at least I can on my computer. So I know that I can see these last couple of ribs. And then as I move back and we look at her hooks and her pin bones or her hip bones, I can begin to see a little sharpness here on her hooks, and I can see a little sharpness back here on her pin bones. And her tail head is beginning to kind of come up. She's not got a lot of excess condition over here around her tail head. So looking at this cow, I would throw her in at a borderline 4 or 5. And so I chose to push her down into the 4 range because I felt like she's showing me more skeletal in the shoulder and more skeletal back here in the hooks and the pin area. So that's where I've got her. I would have been fine if you would have called her at a bottom 5. This cow I had at a strong 5. She's got just a smidge of brisket coming in here, not a lot, but there's just a little bit of brisket fat starting to come in down here. She's pretty smooth through her shoulder blade. You know, you can see her point of her shoulder, but her scapula and everything up here has got some muscle covering over it. You got a little bit of fat condition down through here in this lower kind of rib covered area. There's no ribs that are prominent. She's a lot smoother over her hooks and her pins, and she's getting a little bit of fat covering back over her tail. So she's a borderline 6 for me. And if you called her a 6, I would accept that. With heavier muscled cows, and she's a cow that's not super heavy muscled, but she's probably carrying a little more muscling than some of our average cows. But you know, she should have a little bit more muscle expression and muscling back here in the hindquarter. You know, given that she's a Charolais cross, they generally will carry a little bit thicker back quarters. So I feel like she's kind of regaining some condition and just hasn't picked it all back up. And so she's in that 5-6 kind of border for me. I'd like to see more muscling expression back here and a little bit more muscling down through here to push her back up into that 6 where I knew she regained some of that she lost. And this cow, yeah, I think you're right, pushing her up to the 7 mark. This is a cow that reason I picked this picture was to show you that brisket. Here's a cow that's really carrying a lot of extra down in this brisket area. She's really smooth across the ribs. And if you get back here in her tail head, and I know this is kind of hard to see again on your kind of smaller, maybe camera phones if you're looking at that, but she's starting to accumulate a pretty significant amount of pone fat or fat back here in her tail head. So this is a cow that I would have pushed up to a 7 as well. So we kind of went to where this, maybe we wasted a little bit of money, you know, and overfed her a little bit. This is kind of where I'd like to see these cows, mature cows, coming in and calving in at, and then try to hold them like this until we turn the bulls in. So Dr. Van Valen will go through that more as we move forward on Tuesday in our rally program. So freezer beef, I just wanted to point out or touch a few things to get you thinking about this. Be sure you know your production costs right now, because a lot of folks base their market prices off of feed that was a whole lot less. And we are, you know, dealing with a lot higher feed input cost. And so don't be caught in this that you're selling halves and quarters and you're losing money finishing them out because of the feed cost right now. So always go back and reevaluate that when you're penciling in what you're going to sell your beef for. I think your customers are going to be a whole lot better or maybe more receptive if you're pricing your beef at a point where it's not a big sticker shock when they buy a half now and they come back maybe 9 months later to buy another half. And instead of it being 4 1/4 a pound, you jumped at the 5 1/4 a pound. Try to leave you, you know, going from maybe a little bit where I'm overpricing. And when I see these big feed price bumps, I can only jump maybe say from 4 1/4 to 4.75 and still make the profit margin that I want. And then when feed prices fall back down, I hang on to that 4.75 for a little bit longer and make up that loss back whenever feed prices were a little bit higher. Kind of depends on your customer base, and you've got to know them, but customers can get a little bit fickle, and you can lose them pretty quick if you jump, going from $4.25 to $6 a pound within a year. You can explain it to them the best you can, but if you can buffer in a little bit higher price and make these changes a little smaller, I think, at least in discussions I've had with some folks that have bought beef, they tend to seem like that's a little bit better way to do it. But certainly price it at a point that you're not losing money on it. We can feed cattle just about anything and finish them and feed them just about any way. And we get a lot of questions on, well, what should I feed them? And it comes back to, what is the price? What are the goals that, the end product that you want? And when is your kill date? Because it's getting a bit of a challenge to get cattle in to get killed. And so, if you're backed up and you're 12 months out and you got an 800-pound animal, that's a lot different than you got an 800-pound animal and you're going to kill him in 4 months. So we can finish cattle on grass, and we can finish them on straight corn and a pellet. So anything in between is kind of fair game, and it depends on what you want as an end product, and it depends on how long we got to feed them. But we did a finishing primer, and Brandon brought that up earlier today, and he can share that with you. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going through that other than answering questions that you might have. And the reason for that is later this year, we'll be unveiling and rolling out a master finisher program that Dr. Van Valen got some funds through the Ag Development Board to develop. And so she's killing some cattle, I think started this week, to get some pictures and some carcass data again, like similar to what we did with pasture to plate a few years ago. But we're also going to go a little bit more in depth on it and try to cover some marketing aspects and some of those label issues and developing a label and some of those things in the master finisher program. And then lastly, feed additives. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time, but there's been a lot of questions that have come up on some of the garlic extract products that are maybe available in some of your mineral feeds. And there's been some work looking at it from a fly control standpoint. And to this point, I will say that it is spotty. In a lot of studies, it's very dependent upon the level of intake. And so as you have, for example, stocker cattle that are, say, 600 to 800 pounds, or replacement heifers that are 800 pounds or so, and they're eating 4 ounces of mineral, there seems to be a little bit of fly control. But when you move that 4-ounce intake up into a 1,500 pound cow, it seems to wane on its ability to control flies. And so I think it's a dose dependency. And the other thing that we know is cows don't read the mineral tag, and they don't know they're supposed to come and eat 4 ounces every day. So if the cows aren't getting 4 ounces a day, and some work shows that a cow may only come and eat mineral once a week, then you're probably not going to get very effective control out of a feed product like that. So you really have to make sure that you're getting decent mineral intake, and that all the cows are coming up and consuming it, because otherwise it's going to be a pretty heavy fly burden on some cows and not so much on the others. Then the other component of that in some of the products is a cinnamon extract, and it is not related to fly control. It's more of the essential oil and improving fiber digestion in the rumen to get a little more energy. And there has been in the last decade or so a lot of work on various essential oils. And it's really around manipulating the rumen bugs and trying to improve fermentation in the rumen. One of the things that is a hot topic is greenhouse gas emission. And so a lot of the time has been spent on seeing whether or not any of these essential oil extracts will reduce methane emissions. And so there is some products that seem to have a little bit of influence on that. And I think it's a little bit early, but the cinnamon does seem to have some scientific support behind it that it can improve fermentation a bit, and improve that amount of energy you're going to get out of the forage. But again, it's going to depend on how much those cattle get into them every day. And then there's, as we move into kind of this continued concern about antibiotic use and reducing the use of antibiotics, there's been an interest and a growing interest in prebiotics and probiotics. And prebiotics tend to refer more to like complex sugars like oligosaccharides, and like mono-oligosaccharides is one of those, and it really works on competitive exclusion. It's a very long-chained complex sugar structure that gets down to the large intestine, and some of these undesirable bugs will attach to it trying to break it down. And then as that fiber product is moving down the GI tract, those bugs are bound to it trying to break it down, and then they just get flushed out with the feces. And so there's some yeast cell wall components that are being marketed as kind of that same concept. And so if you have an issue like with scours in calves, and it's maybe a E. coli type of a scour, the whole thought of that is then those bugs would attach to that sugar and be washed out of the system as those cattle are scouring, and allow the normal bug population to be more competitive and reestablish itself. And with scours, that's really what it is you've got these bugs like coronavirus or E. coli that get out of whack, and they're more competitive than with the normal population. So we're trying to get the normal population reestablished. Probiotics, they often are live bugs, and the live bugs then are mixed in with the feed to manipulate the bug population in the rumen. And the hope there is that, we can improve rumen digestion or improve the transition from an all grass diet to a feedlot type diet that's going to be more starch based. And so there has been some benefit on recovering intake on stressed feeder cattle. And so what do I mean by that? Well, when we mix in some of these probiotics that tend to help get the rumen acclimated to the lactic acid that they're going to see when we start feeding them starch, they seem to come up on feed a little bit quicker. Now, they're very diet dependent. And in some situations where you have diets that are low in protein and you don't have enough rumen degradable protein, we don't see the response in the probiotics like we should. And so you have to make sure that your diets are balanced for protein and that there's adequate degradable intake protein in there for this population of bugs that you're adding into the rumen. Now, the other thing with these is that the work would show that they'll clear out within about 24 hours. And so that means that you've got to have that daily dose of these bugs going in, because the rumen bug microflora has evolved over centuries to what it is. And when you try to introduce a foreign bug, they just can't compete. And so you're continually having to reintroduce these other bugs into the rumen every day. Let's see. Oh, I just seen Brandon's "Don't be shy." All right. So that is essentially what I wanted to just cover real quickly and briefly with you. And this is just a little timeline of some things that are coming up here. Tuesday night, we've got the rally program. March the 2nd is the Alfalfa Stored Forage Conference online. There's a virtual cow-calf profitability conference that will be March 23rd through the 25th that Dr. Burdine, Dr. Hallich, and them will run. And then on March the 25th, we actually have a in person at the Bluegrass Stockyards here in Lexington, the Kentucky Novel Fescue Workshop. Here's a question from Scott. Is it harder for cows to calve? That's if they're a little heavier condition. Great question, Scott. And it does depend a little bit on who you talk to on this. And Dr. Anderson and I would probably tend to agree that on mature cows, if they're, closer to that 7 body condition score, even closer to 8, on a mature cow, the pelvic area is pretty big with the genetics that we're using today. And if you're focusing on calving ease genetics, that there really doesn't tend to be as big of an issue on those fleshier type cows. Now, I have personal experience on first calf heifers, and I would say that in my experience on first calf heifers, they do tend to have more issues because the pelvic hasn't fully expanded yet, and you get that fat in the pelvic area and reduces the birthing canal size. And so if you're not really careful on your bull selection because of that smaller pelvic area, and now you've added more fat in there, I've seen more challenges in first calf heifers that are much over a 7. And the other thing I've seen is they wear out quicker. In other words, they just aren't conditioned very well at all. And when they have to push a little harder, it seems like they just want to give up. And you can just go up and grab a feet and give it a little tug, and that calf just spits right out. So I think on first calf heifers, it's a bigger problem than it is on cows. Lena asked recommendation on additives for grain for maintenance cows versus anything extra to add for grain for grower blend. But willing ones, see if we need to tweak things. So Lena, that's a good question. And I would say that, again, thinking about what biomass is, it is a oligosaccharide, and I think it is oligosaccharide, but that is going to help you again where you've got these young calves that maybe are getting a little stressed out and you're concerned about that kind of lower GI tract population. And during weaning, that kind of stress time is a good time to be thinking about that. During periods of times where we got heavy pathogen loads, let's say that that bell grazing picture you all saw where there was a lot of fecal pats in the little area, there's a lot of pathogens that are in the feces there. And if you got young newborn calves, it's hard to get that in there, right? Because they're just going to mama's milk. But, you got some calves there now that are probably going to be weaned in about a month. He's probably going to pull those calves off those cows in a month. If you were creep feeding and we got this weather that we're fixing to get a lot of rain and nasty weather, and it's going to stress the calves, and you got a lot of fecal material out in the fields that could get on some of the little short grass that these calves might start eating, that's where some of the biomass would potentially help you on a pathogen load. I don't feel like there's much of a need for it in mature cows. That doesn't seem to really have as big of effect in mature cows. There is the potential for some of the products that maybe will help improve rumen digestion and or maybe help you with fiber digestion in the rumen. And so one of those, trying to remember the name of the product, it's not coming to me right now, having a brain fart. It'll come to me here in a minute and I'll come back to it. But one of the things that we did do is we did increase the cobalt in our recommendations. And the reason for that is cobalt is a cofactor for these rumen microbes. And the research was pretty clear from about 20 years ago that if we short the rumen on cobalt, we reduce rumen fermentation. And so in the last iteration of the NRC, well, what used to be called the NRC, we bumped the cobalt level up a little bit. So I know I didn't answer that question very well for you, Lena, and I'm sorry, but as far as additives go, one of the things, it depends on what you're marketing and how you're marketing. I think there is a huge opportunity for using the ionophores, and the ionophores would be your Bovatech and your Rumensin products. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my chat and get a little bigger. But if you can use Rumensin because you're not selling natural or organic, I think that is a pretty solid technology yet. Rumensin reduces methane emissions as well, so it's a way we can make our cows greener. And the challenge with it on cows is there is no free choice label for Rumensin to be fed to mature beef cows. So the label actually states it has to be fed with at least a pound of grain for cows. For growing calves, for developing heifers, for stocker cattle, backgrounding cattle, there is a free choice mineral product that you can use to get Rumensin into them. There's also a Bovatech block out there, but I'm not real high on the mineral specs on the Bovatech block, so I typically don't recommend it. Scott asked, how long can you store dry baled hay before it loses quality of nutrients? A long time, Scott. That's a fantastic question. And I'm going to pull up some message here real quick, see if I can find this. Ben Connor, who is the ag agent in Scott County, pulled some hay samples from a producer that was 30 years old. And I'm going to share, see if I can get this to work. Can you all see this? This is 1992 grass hay. Brandon, you got that?
Yeah, we got it. Tom Gregory.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Check this hay out. This is 30-year-old hay that's been stored in the barn. Still running almost 16% crude protein on a dry matter basis. TDN still 57. So Scott, you don't lose much on nutrient. There will be some moldy issues, mold growth because of the humidity that we have in the air. So the outside bales and some of that may get a little bit of mold going, but you don't lose very much. And the mold will grow on and take your nitrogen down just a smidge, and it will eat some of the sugars that are in the hay, and that will artificially inflate your fiber content. But it doesn't go down very much if you keep it dry and kind of in a well-ventilated barn. Anybody ever think they'd see a 30-year-old hay sample? How about that? Somebody needs more cows, right? Let's see, there's another question that came in. Currently using ear corn and baled soybeans running through grinder mixer. What other additives would be needed for cow maintenance? So that's a great question. Let's see, baled soybeans, currently ear corn. I'm assuming, Shane, that this would you'd still be using a good free choice mineral with that. And as long as you keep a good free choice mineral out there. The challenge with some of the baled soybeans, depending on when they were cut, that soybean stem is not really high in digestibility. It's a lot like alfalfa. All of your quality from baled soybeans and alfalfa is in the leaf content. And so depending on the stage of maturity, it can be a little bit low in digestibility. And without having the forage sample in front of me, I would say for cows that are in maybe late stage of gestation, that are getting ready to calve here in the next month or so, you're probably okay. And you've got free choice mineral out in the protein tubs. I think you're probably okay. If you wanted, you could send the numbers to Brandon, send him like approximately, I'm throwing in 1 bale of, let's see, going through a grinder mixer. So baled soybeans. I'm thinking, Shane, that this might be going in a TMR mixer. And if that's the case, just get Brandon the quantities of hay roughly. If they're a big round bale that's weighing 1,200-1,400 pounds, and if it's 1,000 pounds of ear corn, or if it's ear corn and 2 50-pound bales of small square bales of soybean hay, just get that to Brandon, and then we can run that through the ration balancer and see where you're at on that. But I suspect they're pretty decent. Are they holding their condition? That's the other thing, is if the cows are holding their body condition and they're staying in that 5-6 range, and then yeah, you're probably meeting their nutritional needs. What else? All right, I'm gonna throw you one. What do you all think is going to happen with the 3D printed beef? Did you all see that in the popular press and the news? A group out of Israel made the first steak that was 3D printed.
I don't even know what that means, Jeff.
Well, there's these printers that that on a flat surface, there's these printers that will use synthetic compounds like proteins, amino acid complexes, and sugars. And then it prints and it goes back and forth, and it will build up, and it builds something that looks like a steak out of synthetic proteins, synthetic amino acids, and fats and that. So it's not that we've grown it in a culture. It's actually made from synthetics. So it's something new that hit the market. Well, not hit the market, sorry. It's something new that scientists developed and were able to do.
Man, that's pretty wild. I hadn't heard about that.
Technology's coming a long ways. Yeah. Shane, they're holding how many pounds of feed per cow per day? That's a loaded question for me, Shane, and I'm sorry. I guess how many pounds of feed? I'm going to have you follow up with Brandon and get us a few more details on that. But I would suspect if I were looking, and I don't know what your composition is, but let's just say it's a couple small square bales going into a grinder mixer with ground ear corn. And these cows, you're expecting the calve out starting in March, and they've got average grass hay along with it. I'd be looking at saying 2 to 4 pounds. If they're holding condition, that'd be down in that 2 to 3 pounds per head per day for the ear corn. Get with Brandon, yeah, and get us a little bit more details, and we can work on balancing that out for you. Cow pie is whole. Let's see. Feed mix has whole corn. Yep. So what does cow get from the corn not broken down egg? That's a fantastic question, Scott. So believe it or not, some poor grad student in Ohio got stuck on a project where they actually had to sort out the kernels of corn out of feces, and they actually counted the number of kernels of corn that passed through an animal. And then what they also did is they measured the amount of starch in the feces between cracked corn and whole shell corn. And the amount of starch that came out of the feces was the exact same between cracked corn and whole shell corn. The difference is that you couldn't see the cracked corn little pieces, but you could see the big kernels of corn. And so when we're supplementing cows 3, 4, 5 pounds of corn a day, you really don't get the economic benefit from cracking it. And the reason I say that is if I go to my local feed store down here and I ask for cracked corn, it's going to be $30 to $50 a ton more than wholesale corn. And the research would say that the improvement in digestibility from mouth to feces is only going to be about 3 to 5%. And so when you push the numbers on that, you can't make it pencil. Now there's different situations, and as you move to, let's say, a ration that you want to use distiller's grains and you want, or maybe soybean meal, and you want to throw your mineral in there as well, then I would say the reason for using cracked corn is so you don't have the sorting, because cattle prefer a particle size about the size of a kernel of corn or a pellet when you're giving them grain, and they'll actually pick through and get the kernels of corn and the pellets out and leave your fines behind. And so when you're moving to using distiller's grains and soybean meal and some of that as your protein sources, then I'd say reducing separation justifies moving the cracked corn over shell corn. There's been 50 years of research looking at cracked corn versus whole corn, and nearly every time the research comes back and says that in forage-based rations, we tend not to see the economic benefit of cracking the corn. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm always bad about interrupting on these things with the lag, so sorry about that. It's right at about 8 o'clock, and I know we kind of said we go to about 8, and so I think if there's some more questions, we'll continue on. Jeff, if you can hang around just a little bit if you'd like. But before other folks jump off, I've got a poll question I'm going to try to put up here if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to just put this up, and just one simple question, and I'm going to go ahead and launch it right now. Okay, everybody should see that about future extension meetings. All right, looks like, yep, they're rolling in. There's 3 people have 5, okay. 7 of 13, 8, 9. All right, just a few more.
I'm going to
Okay.
address Brad's question real quick.
Sure.
So Brad, what do they get out of it? Well, it is not beef, and I think it's like anything else. It is a way to get protein, and if you're building a product that is very similar in the amino acid profile and very similar in the mineral profile, then the thought there is that rather than using a protein powder like what we would see in some of the nutrition stores, and that the thought there is that I can get my nutrition in something that looks like a meat product. But I don't personally see it going over very well, and the reason for that is the people that tend to want those products are the people that tend to be more on the natural and organic side, and I just don't know what kind of market this is going to have. Brandon, it looks like you got 100%. Looks like you're muted, Brandon.
Can you all see the results there of the poll? Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure what you could see there. It looks like
Well, I
majority.
can, but I'm a co-host, so I didn't
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
I can
I'm gonna
see
hit end polling.
No,
Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, I see how to do it now. Okay, now you should see it. Got it?
So, Brandon, this follows kind of what some of the discussion we had with our farmers on our farm visit today, is that some of them enjoyed being at home in their lazy boy, listening to the programs rather than sitting in a hard chair in your office. And others enjoyed getting out and having the social interaction and seeing folks and talking. So it was kind of a mixed crowd.
Yeah, there's some give and take in this, but I don't have far to drive. Nobody does here in a few minutes, so that makes it nice too. One of the things that we're going to work on at the extension office is trying to bring our audio visual equipment up to par, so that we can live while we're doing in-person meetings at the office. So that's something we'll be working on, probably more offices, I would say too. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing those. And just real quick, I'll cover just one quick thing here, and then we can continue on. Some folks have to jump off, but I'll send out an email in a couple weeks. It'll just be a little simple survey. You can just click on answers there too and get back to us. And that'll kind of help us evaluate how good these programs are, and kind of get a sense of how we're doing. And there'll be a question on there too that I'll ask you about some future programs that you'd like to see in beef cattle, whether it's nutrition or reproduction or finishing and whatnot. And so be looking for that in a couple weeks. And if you don't care, just take a few minutes and get that back to me, and I'd appreciate that. I don't know. I don't see any other questions coming in from the group, Jeff. I did have one other question, or I guess something to talk about. We talked about additives and some of that earlier. There are some of these endophyter products that are in mineral that I think are marketed to overcome the vasoconstriction from endophyte tall fescue. I've heard some guys locally that have tried different versions of that or different products, and anecdotally they're saying they're really seeing these, in this case was stocker calves, in the summer heat. They were seeing a difference in their grazing behavior, and they were staying out and grazing longer and not really showing so much heat stress. Is there anything kind of, I guess, on the forefront of that, anything new coming out, or any research that's kind of looked at how effective some of those products are? I want to say there was it capsaicin in one of those products maybe?
That's right.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yep. So the products would potentially hold some promise. So capsaicin is a pepper extract, and what it would do is it would be a vasodilator. So one of the things with kind of the endophyte is it causes the blood vessels to constrict near the periphery. And so when you have constriction of the blood flows going to the skin during the heat stress, you're reducing blood flow, and you're reducing the ability for the animal to dissipate core body temperature. Core body temperature is 103, let's say, and let's say they're really getting hot because they're black hot, and they're getting that radiant heat or solar heat from the sun. So maybe they're running 104. And so if it's 104 body temperature and it's 90 degrees outside, there's a natural radiant flow of heat from the animal to the environment, right? But if you constrict blood flow and you're not pushing as much blood to the skin, the animal doesn't dissipate that heat that way as quickly. And so capsaicin combats that and opens those blood vessels back up to get more blood flow going to the skin. And so that would be a potential benefit from that standpoint. The other aspect is is some of the products also contain a binder. And the thought is it would bind some of the alkaloids in the rumen, very similar like just what we talked about with some of the oligosaccharides. It would bind that and prevent it from being absorbed into the bloodstream and push it right out the feces. And so in combination and in theory, they would have some potential. Again, it's a dosage issue, right? Those cattle have to eat the right dosage every day. And a product that's targeted at 4 ounces a day on 400-pound calves is probably going to be more effective than 4 ounces on an 800-pound calf, because you're diluting down that product or that active ingredient by body weight as those cattle get bigger. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So there is some preliminary data out there that shows that there can be some benefits in stocker cattle, but to my knowledge, there has been no peer-reviewed, published university research done on them yet.
Okay. Okay, good to know. Anybody else have any questions?
They show promise.
I'll give a little bit more time for a few questions if anybody's thinking about it. Just a couple quick things I'll mention. If anybody had buttercup issues last year, the yellow flower that comes up and can cover entire fields, pastures, feeding areas, in the next roughly 3 weeks or so, it's going to be a really good time to spray those. We've got a couple, they're new actually, boomless sprayers, and they're available through Farm Bureau through that shared use program. And they're, I think, just $50 a day. I think maybe 2 days back to back is 75, but 2 pints of 2,4-D on small buttercup at the right time when the daytime temperatures roughly are getting in that 55 to 60 degree range will really go a long way to taking it out. By the time we usually kind of see it after it gets showy and it's got that yellow flower, a lot of time it's already dropped mature seed, and it's also a lot harder to kill. And that's a plant that's going to kind of decline anyway as the weather warms up into May and June. So just kind of a reminder, it's sometimes hard to think about spraying that early, but that's a really good time to get buttercup and a lot of other broadleaf weeds. And we can do it pretty cheaply and pretty easily with a boomless sprayer and some 2,4-D. You could use a sprayer with a boom, of course, as well. But just a reminder on that, Jeff, because I know there'll be some questions later on about that. And would you care to maybe plug a little bit or talk about the beef cattle website online there through the department, where you guys are keeping the archive videos? There's just a ton of good information there on a variety of aspects of cattle production. There's beef minutes. You've got a podcast on there as well. And so I just want to kind of mention that before we wrap up here, that just so much good information coming out now, and this is a good site for that.
Sure thing. Let me see if I can get it to share. I'm wanting to share screen one. All right, there we go. Now you should be able to see our website. Can you see it? Okay. So there's a lot of good information up here, like Brandon said, and this is our animal science website. So it's the Department of Animal Sciences website. And we started this news and events column on the right-hand side. And this is for the entire department here on the right. You can go to beef. If you click on beef, then it will bring you to our specific beef programs here that are coming up. And so you can see there's programs there. And the other thing I'll say as an example down here, if you see this freezer beef boot camp, these are programs that agents are hosting regionally, and a specialist might be involved in it. And if the agent's okay for us to put it up here, then we'll throw it up here as well. Sometimes we want programs smaller like this tonight, where we can be a little bit more refined and kind of keep the questions in that a little bit more local. So those things are up here. So if you're interested in this freezer beef boot camp that Boone County and those guys are doing up there, you can go up there and think about registering for that. But then down here on the left hand, as Brandon said, is our Off the Hoof newsletters. And then we just reorganized these videos here, had our web person kind of come back through. And if you missed Beef Bash this year when it was virtual, here's some of the programs from Beef Bash. Beef Minutes is a very short 3-4 minute episode that Dr. Van Valen is doing mostly here. And they're also on our Facebook page, but you can go back and look at those. And then all of our Reaching Out While Locked In series, which are the long Tuesday night programs, they're all here as well. And so you can scroll down and watch recordings on those. And Dr. Anderson did the I Bought a Heifer, or I Bought a Farm, and Now What, where he's developing the heifers from purchasing them all the way through breeding. And so he's got all of those videos up here. And then the podcasts that we do, we're putting those up here as well. And so they're typically around 40 minutes or so, and you can listen to them on Spotify or Apple Podcast, or Podbean is where I host them. But they're just some general kind of podcasts on the beef industry and what's going on. So that's where all that is housed. We have a department YouTube page as well. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure where that is right now. I have to go back and look up the link for you, Brandon. But there is a YouTube for the department.
There's just so much good information out there, and that's a good place to go and get it where it's kind of all gathered together. And I just thought we'd mention that real quick. And the other thing I think might mention real quickly too, there's a program that's in the works. It's an app for smartphones called Kentucky Extend, and it'll be coming out. That it'll be I guess there's a manage component, a learn, and a connect component to it. And so we'll be able to interact with you guys. It'll be a subscription service, but I'll be talking a little bit more about that as it kind of is unrolled later on. But we'll be able to share information directly with you in a group. You'll be able to contact us. We'll be able to put out notifications for meetings. There'll be content that'll come out every morning to your phone that'll be pertinent for your situation. And so we're looking forward to that, Jeff. I know it's in the development, well, kind of in, I guess, the testing stages right now. And we'll be doing some of that, but working a few bugs and making some changes, but be looking for that later on this year. Madison County Ag Development Council put in the $5,000 toward that. And so Madison County producers will benefit because there'll be, I believe, unlimited subscriptions, maybe the first year on that. So there'll be no subscription fee to Madison County. So we'll be talking about that more in the future. And I think that'll be really good, good way we can keep in touch and you guys can interact with us. So be looking for some of that info later on. Jeff, I don't see any more questions.
Brandon, one of the things I'm excited about that program too is it will have a record keeping system in it as well. And it will also allow you to put some financials in on how much your feed costs were and health costs were. So we can do a rough standardized performance analysis like they used to do. And I'm excited about that to help producers see what some of their costs are in relation to their production.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. And I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming.
Brandon, I have one last plug. So if you missed the Mid-South Stocker Conference that we did on Tuesday, be watching for that. We're going to try to put it up on the website or some links up to the website. And if you have Facebook and you're not on our UK B5M Facebook page, I'd encourage you to connect to it, because we will also stream the Raleigh live on there, and then the Beef Minutes comes out on there, and then programs such as the Mid-South Stalker Conference that are a little bit more directed to a specific group, that background cattle and that. We put those announcements on the Facebook as well. So if you haven't connected and you're looking for some of that, I'd encourage you to jump on that Facebook page.
Yeah, that's good to mention that too. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, and we're a decent ways past 8 o'clock. I guess we could go ahead and look to wrap up here. Dr. Lehmkuhler, I sure do appreciate you coming on with us tonight, and everybody for joining. I really think it was a good format. I enjoyed it. I think it was good. We're looking forward to being able to get back to meeting in person again in the coming months. So that will eventually happen. So that'll be good when that does. So if there's no other questions, I guess we'll call it an evening, and everybody have a good evening, have a good weekend. And if you've got any questions that you think of, anything you need to follow up with, just send me an email or give me a call, and we'll work it out and get some of your questions resolved. I can consult with Jeff, as he said, and we can go from there. So appreciate everybody, and y'all have a good evening.